It's a real honor and pleasure to welcome the Pulitzer Prize winning writer and hometown hero, Richard Russo, back to the New York State Writers Institute. As many of you know, we're all honored guests here today. We're here to celebrate one of the first readings from Russo's brand new novel, Everybody's Fool. We're all aware that this capital city thrives on politics and political intrigue, so I thought I should make it clear up front that Everybody's Fool, despite what the title may suggest, it is not a literary exploration of the current presidential election. Instead, this novel explores, exactly as the title suggests, the upstate New York territory that Russo has created and that we know so well. It's the same territory we're fortunate enough to inhabit, even when Russo himself is in between books. Everybody's Fool gives us the chance to catch up with the characters from Nobody's Fool, which you remember was published back in 1993. It's a true blessing to once again spend time in Ballston Spa and Saratoga Springs. I mean, of course, North Bath and Schuyler Springs with our old friends Sully and Rub, Raymer and Roebuck, Ruth and Janie, as well as a few folks new to the neighborhood. Even as the novel offers us the pleasures of a homecoming reunion, it also seems interested in encouraging us to think about what it might mean to leave home. This is, after all, a novel that spends a lot of time in a cemetery, and in this particular cemetery, even the dead are on the move. Headstones and coffins sliding around because of erosion and other assorted problems. So there's that ultimate departure looming, but there are also the more incremental ones. Many of these characters are nearing the ends of their lives. Their families are drifting apart. Their marriages and friendships are under pressure and in danger of winding down. Will they find some kind of rest and respite, maybe even peace in their old home? I think it's safe to say, without requiring a spoiler alert, they've already sold out a book, so if you didn't get one, you'll have to order one, but you'll go home and start reading right away, but I'm not going to spoil anything. The answer about the home might be more murky than you think. We probably already sense this from the many contradictory homilies we hear about home. Home is where the heart is, but home is where we like to build walls and fences. Home is on the range, but ranges, at least the ones in the kitchens I've known, can get awfully hot. Thomas Wolfe says you can't go home again, but he also says you should look homeward, angel. Bob Dylan tells you you can always come back, but you can't come back all the way. The Talking Heads in one song tell us that the home is where they want to be, and then in another song they seem surprised that this is not their beautiful house. Maybe I can get at this a different way. The popular idea that there is no place like home can be both positive and negative, which might have something to do with why Russo's poignant and award-winning memoir is called Elsewhere. It might be better, as far as Sully and Raymer and Russo are concerned, for us to focus on our collective ability to feel at home with ourselves. That strikes me as the struggle that truly powers this extraordinary new novel. The wonderful, matriarchal, always intimidating teacher, Miss Beryl Peoples, haunts these pages, and her former students can't help remembering, with a mix of fondness and fear, how she would annotate their essays, filling the margins with deceptively simple questions, chief among them, who are you? In other words, reading Everybody's Fool is similar to reading so many of Russo's great books over the last few decades. From Mohawk to The Risk Pool, to Empire Falls, to The Bridge of Sighs, to Elsewhere, and beyond. As we read, if we pay attention, as Miss Peoples strongly urges everyone to do, we watch our friends, our neighbors, our loved ones learn, or at least try to learn, who they are. And by laughing and occasionally crying alongside them, we as readers learn more about who we are and how we might become better citizens of this home we can never really choose or unchoose. Sully and his friend Worf, back in Nobody's Fool, puzzle this out more clearly than I am doing here. In one of their many wisdom-heavy conversations, they seem simply Whitman-esque as they embrace two contradictory truths. One, people do the same things over and over again. Two, people are full of surprises. So, should we be surprised that Russo has returned home to, we'll call it Bath and Schuyler Springs? No, we should not be surprised. And yet, as you read this triumphant, laugh-out-loud, heartbreaking novel, you will be surprised by such things as cobras and garage door openers and strange odors, bolts of lightning, evil, dark-bearded ventriloquists, and much more. You will also be surprised and overjoyed as your old friends struggle to feel at home with themselves again and again. Please welcome back, once again, Richard Russo.
Well, since I'm not going to be reading from the beginning of the book, I need to fill you in on a little bit of background. At the opening of Everybody's Fool, Chief of Police Douglas Raymer is attending the funeral of Judge Barton Flatt, a man who has humiliated him on any number of occasions. It's Memorial Day weekend, and North Bath is in the midst of an unseasonal heat wave with temperatures in the 90s. In Raymer's pocket is a garage door remote, the one he found in his wife's car after her tragic death a year earlier. She slipped on a rug at the top of the stairs just as she was about to run off with another man, whose identity is a mystery that Raymer hopes to solve by means of the remote. In town, as the funeral drags on under the broiling sun, there's an accident at the old mill that's being converted into high-end condos. An explosion that causes one of the building's walls to collapse into the street and can be heard all the way out to the cemetery. Feeling the ground shake, Raymer, in his dress blues, passes out into the open grave and is rushed to the emergency room. And that's where we pick up the story. Wait, you fainted into the grave? Charisse's voice crackled with a mixture of radio static and disbelief. Sympathy would come later, Raymer knew. Probably when she saw him, saw the damage, which, in the warped mirror on the wall opposite where he sat, bare-assed, draped in a flimsy paper Johnny, was pretty damned impressive. His broken nose was swollen hideously, and both eyes were slits. He'd been told that a doctor would be in to see him shortly, but that was nearly half an hour ago. And the examination room's air conditioning was in brutal contrast to the sweltering heat outside. His head throbbed dully, but apart from that, he didn't feel too bad, and certainly not as bad as he looked. The lightheaded, elsewhere feeling that he had suffered prior to losing consciousness out at Hilldale was gone, as was his dizziness. He was tempted to just get up, get dressed, and leave. But instead of hanging up his sweaty uniform, he'd made the mistake of draping it over the air conditioning unit. Putting it back on would be like donning a frigid, wet onesie. And he shivered at the thought. Into the grave, Charisse repeated, apparently willing to concede the truth of what he was telling her, but still unable to wrap her mind around what had happened. Like on top of the casket? No, he explained. His honor was still above ground. So why are you in the emergency room? It was my face that broke the fall, he said. But never mind that. Tell me again what happened out at the old mill. Because Charisse wasn't the only one having trouble processing recent events. The whole building actually... So you slumped forward and rolled into the grave? I fainted, Charisse, okay? You know that matting they edge graves with? They say I tripped over that, but I really don't remember. Ask Gus. He saw the whole thing. And would be thrilled to recount the whole shit show, Raymer thought. According to the mayor, Raymer's knees hadn't buckled or anything. Rather, he had gone down like a tree. One minute you were standing there, and the next it was like, timber! You went in that hole like it was dug to your exact specifications. You were just gone. You know what it's like when you try to stuff a cat into a bag, how there's always a leg sticking out? Raymer had just blinked at him. Why would he have ever put a cat in a bag? Was Gus confessing to having drowned kittens at some point? Why did he imagine that this was an experience that other people would be familiar with? It wasn't like that at all, Gus insisted. You went in clean and neat. There was just the one sound you made when you hit bottom and then a plume of dust. I don't think I ever saw anything like it, and I was in Korea. Korea, where he had spent the last 7 months of the conflict. That was Gus's particular touchstone. It was one of the few times that he had been out of upstate New York for an extended period, and his experience on that misbegotten peninsula, even more than his graduate work in government, was the reason that he believed himself qualified to be the mayor of North Bath. Was it over there, Raymer wondered, where he had done his cat stuffing? Charisse, he told her sternly, I want to hear about the mill, all right? Because I don't understand how that could happen. How does a whole building just fall down? Not the whole building, she said, just the north wall, the one facing Lime Rock Street. The other walls are still standing? How can that be? I'm just telling you what I was told, she said. By who? Miller's on the scene, she said. Miller. Jerome's there too, she added. Jerome. You're repeating everything I say, she said. Your brother, Jerome. Jerome worked for the Schuyler Springs Police Department and served as a liaison officer between the department and the college and the mayor's office. Doing exactly what, Raymer wasn't sure, except that he was required to be on television a lot, either attempting to explain the inexplicable or to obfuscate the perfectly clear. It's his day off, Charisse said, so he stopped by the station. He's got this joke he wants to tell you. When the call came in about the mill, he figured we could use a hand. Raymer sighed. Why is he acting like this? Because lately, Jerome had become increasingly solicitous about Raymer's welfare, always stopping by the station on some pretense, telling him jokes and calling him buddy. Well, he's worried about you, Charisse said. Why? I'm worried about you. Why? Chief, she said, as if the answer to this question was so obvious it needn't be voiced. His head was hurting worse now, probably because of the fall, but possibly not. His head often hurt when he talked to Charisse. I mean, imagine, okay, she said. Please, Raymer begged. Charisse was forever asking him to imagine this or that, usually something extremely unpleasant, like trying to put a cat in a bag or some other Korean-type activity. Please don't, he said. Imagine, she said, you're in a great big room with 10,000 other guys. Actually, I'm in a small room all by myself, he said. And the guy in charge says, okay, show of hands. Who out there has ever passed out at a funeral? Stop, please, he said. She ignored him, of course. Charisse believed for some reason that a vivid imagination was the true path to understanding. Passed out, she repeated, right into an open grave. Desist, he told her. This is a direct order I'm giving here. Yours would be the only hand in the air, Charisse noted. That's all I'm saying. Charisse, he said, all right, make it 100,000 guys if you want, 1 million. It's still just you with his hand in the air, Chief. Actually, I wouldn't have my hand in the air either, Raymer said reluctantly, giving into her scenario. Why would I admit something like that in front of 10,000 other guys? Imagine if you lied, you'd be electrocuted, she suggested. I've got a better idea, he said. Imagine you work for me and you have to do what I say. Tell Jerome I don't want to hear another stupid joke. Also remind him that he has no jurisdiction in Bath. Well, I'll tell him, but you know Jerome. I do, Raymer said. Also his sister, 2 peas in a pod. The metaphor was particularly apt in their case as they were twins. Have Miller come pick me up at the hospital. Sorry? Miller's busy at the scene, she said. Where's your own car? Out at the cemetery. Gus wouldn't let me drive. Well, I'll call Jerome then. He won't mind. Don't, he said. Do not call Jerome. I swear to God, if he comes out here, I'll shoot him on sight. Well, then you'll have exactly 0 friends, she said. All you got now is him and me, and I won't be your friend no more if you shoot my brother, because that would be unnatural. Anymore, Raymer said. You won't be my friend anymore. Well, there you again, making fun of how I talk, she said. I'm going to add that to my list. Charisse claimed to be compiling a list of all the workplace shit he gave her. It had several distinct, if to Raymer's mind, overlapping categories of abuse. Illegal, immoral, actionable, insulting, bigoted, and just plain wrong. She hadn't showed him the list, but claimed that it was growing and was now pretty comprehensive. Do you have any idea how bad my head hurts right now, Charisse? He said. Well, that's why they took you to the hospital, to get yourself checked out. Stay there, why don't you? Jerome can handle things. Miller, you mean, he said. Miller can handle things. It's Miller on our payroll, not Jerome. Well, Chief, we both know Miller can't handle anything, no matter whose payroll he's on. I don't care, Raymer said. Send somebody out here to get me. Anybody but your brother, okay? Make sure whoever it is brings that big bottle of extra-strength Tylenol that I keep in my desk, and a Diet Coke. Come yourself if you have to. Oh, I get it, she said. This is a test, right? Last week you chew my ass out for leaving the switchboard to pee, and now you want to see if I've learned my lesson? Goodbye, Charisse, he said. In 5 minutes, I'm going to be on that bench outside the hospital, main entrance, not emergency. Somebody better be there. Head throbbing at a good beat now, he slid off the examination table and wobbled over to his clothes, to where his clothes rested on the air conditioner. His jockeys, no surprise, were still soaked with sweat, but also very, very cold. Imagine, he could almost hear Charisse say, imagine what it would feel like to pull those on. Like a wet bathing suit, all nasty and cold up there in your private place. Raymer closed his eyes and pulled them on, and Charisse was right. That was exactly how they felt. Thank you.
When your grandchildren ask you about your childhood, assuming they will one day, what, if any, are the things about Gloversville that you want to make sure you share with them?
That's an interesting question because the world has changed so much since I was a child, and my grandchildren are now 6 and 3, and they live in South Portland, very near us, in a quiet residential neighborhood. very safe. And yet, I think we all have this idea now, and I think we need certainly to be vigilant with our children and our grandchildren. And I suspect that that little Molly and Henry are going to be on a much shorter leash than I was on when I was a boy. And it's not like in Gloversville that nothing bad could happen to you, but from a very early age, from the time that I was old enough to learn how to ride a bicycle, I basically just left the house, and I don't think anybody thought anything of it. And of course, when I became infatuated with baseball, I and several other neighborhood kids and other kids used to congregate in Darling Field and play baseball all morning long in the summer, and then all afternoon long as well. And we would show up back at home for lunch and then show up in time for dinner. And basically, I don't think my grandparents, who were looking after me because my mother was at work and my father was in absentia, I don't think anybody gave a single thought to a kid being gone all day long, basically. There was just the assumption that, you were out with your friends and you'd be fine. And I don't think any parent would probably come to that conclusion anymore, probably anywhere. And so I remember Gloversville as a kid, as a place of great freedom, where I was beginning to find out who I might be among people other than my family. And if I could wish something for my grandchildren, it would be whatever the modern day equivalent of that is, because what I'm seeing now in the way children are being raised by mothers who feel like they have to schedule their children's every moment. Soccer practice to play practice to oboe lessons to, every moment of the child's existence is accounted for. And so where do you learn? You're going to learn to play the oboe, but where do you learn about who you are, and how do you learn to socialize? How do you learn to make your own friends, as opposed those that are provided for you by your parents who have who are traveling in certain social circles. And so I don't know what that is for contemporary children, but I know and suspect that my childhood is just no longer possible. One of the things that I've taken an enormous amount of pride in the last few years is being able to help with the fundraising efforts for the Gloversville Free Library, or for the Gloversville Public Library. Thank you. I didn't, believe me. There are some real heroes in that effort, and I am not among them. But one of the things that I want for my granddaughter and my grandson is to have that devotion to books, but also in particular to libraries. Libraries are more important now than they were even when I was a kid, there aren't as many books in them, but they have so many more uses now than they did before, and I want my granddaughter and my grandson to inhabit such places and to find themselves, if it's not on the baseball field, in the library where they roam among the stacks unattended like I did, nobody following me around, nobody caring much which books I took off the shelf, even when I was supposed to be in the children's section, going into the adult section where I learned very quickly was where it was at, and just roaming there. So we seem to be in a time right now where as a culture we've lost faith in public institutions, and public institutions like libraries are continue to be enormously important. And so it's been for me in Gloversville over the last few years, watching that effort take off from the time they told me we need to raise between $6 and $10 million, and I said, in Gloversville. Thinking, well, you know, if they raise 500,000, they're going to be very good. But they've raised over $6 million between grants from the Latour Foundation, grants from the state of New York. They're coming up to getting a designation for it to be the Gloversville Library to be on the historic register, which opens up new opportunities for funding. They actually passed a bond issue this week. Amazing, given how blighted economically that community is. Raised a bond issue to have a marginal small tax increase that was actually voted up in Gloversville. People have donated in Gloversville, 800 people at least have donated that range from $5 to $250,000. A community that nothing like this has happened in that community for a very, very long time. And you can get, when I go back there now, for a long time, I would go back and I was depressed because the town had just been so long in this downward economic spiral, and there just didn't seem to be any bright spots, nothing to look at and point to and say, let's do more of this. But now what we're seeing as a result of the library, I think, are these little green shoots, you know, sticking up, and a sense of a community that's beginning to believe in itself again after a very long period of despair. And so my grandchildren, I want them to feel that way about their community. I want them to feel that way about their home and how important it is for what is home for them to be home for other people, and to find themselves in that community of people who may be different from them.